In today's video, you will learn to represent fractions as multiples of a unit fraction. Let's get started. There are two important vocabulary terms that we need to review. The first one is multiple. We have learned that a multiple is the product of two numbers that are multiplied together. So for example, if I multiply 5 times 4, the product is 20. 20 is a multiple of both 5 and 4. Another vocabulary term that we need to review is unit fraction. A unit fraction is a fraction with a numerator of 1. For example, 1/3 is a unit fraction. 1/10 is a unit fraction. 1/50th is also a unit fraction. If it has a numerator of 1, it is a unit fraction, and unit fractions name one part of the whole. Here's a simple word problem to get us started. Jen used 1/3 cup of skim milk to make a strawberry smoothie. How much milk does Jen need for 2 smoothies? So I'm going to go ahead and circle the numbers that I see. I see 1/3 cup, and I see 2. And the question is asking, how much milk does Jen need for 2 smoothies? Now there are a couple ways that I can solve this. One strategy would be to draw a picture. So for one smoothie, Jen uses 1/3 cup of skim milk. So I'm going to draw a fraction bar and break it up into 3 equal parts because the denominator of my fraction is 3, and I'm going to shade in one of those 3 equal parts to represent 1/3 cup. And since she's making 2 smoothies, I'm going to draw a second fraction bar and break it up into 3 equal parts and shade one out of the 3 equal parts to represent another 1/3 cup. So by looking at my picture here, I can see that there are a total of 2/3 shaded. So Jen would need 2/3 of a cup of skim milk to make her 2 smoothies. Another strategy would be to write an addition equation for this. So if Jen needs 1/3 of a cup for one smoothie and another 1/3 cup for the second smoothie, I could just add those together and I would get 2/3 of a cup of skim milk. The last strategy would be to represent this with a multiplication equation. Well, since I'm adding 1/3 over and over again, that's just repeated addition. So I can turn this into a multiplication problem because remember, multiplication is just repeated addition. Well, since there are 2 1/3s, I can multiply 2 times 1/3, and that would give me 2/3 cup of skim milk. In the problem we just solved, Jen needed 1/3 of a cup of skim milk to make her strawberry smoothie. To make 2 strawberry smoothies, she needed 2/3 of a cup of skim milk. And we got that by multiplying 2 times 1/3. Now just a little bit ago, we said that a multiple is the product of 2 numbers. Well, 2/3 is the product of 2 and 1/3. So 2/3 is a multiple of both 2 and 1/3. And it is actually the second multiple of the unit fraction 1/3. If Jen wanted to make 3 strawberry smoothies, she would need 3/3 cup of skim milk. And I got that by multiplying 3 times 1/3. Now, 3/3 is the product of 3 times 1/3. So it is a multiple of both 3 and the unit fraction 1/3. And it is the third multiple of 1/3. Now, what if Jen wanted to make 4 strawberry smoothies? Well, to find that, I could multiply 4 by 1/3, and I would get 4/3 cups of skim milk for her 4 smoothies. 4/3 is the product of 4 times 3. So that means it is a multiple of both 4 and the unit fraction 1/3. And it's actually the fourth multiple of 1/3. Now, if you look back at our list of multiples here, we have 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, 4/3. All I'm doing is skip counting by 1/3, or adding 1/3 over and over again. So if I start at 1/3 and I want to find the second multiple, I would just add 1/3 plus 1/3, and it would give me 2/3. To find the third multiple, I would just add another 1/3 to 2/3, and that gives me 3/3. To find the fourth multiple, I'm just going to add another 1/3 to 3/3, and that gives me 4/3. How do you think I'm going to find the fifth multiple of 1/3? If you said add another 1/3, you would be correct. So if I add 1/3 to 4/3, that gives me 5/3, and that is the fifth multiple of 1/3. So notice all of these multiples here are multiples of the unit fraction 1/3. Now I'm going to show you how to write an addition equation and a multiplication equation to describe a picture and figure out the multiple of a fraction. So notice I have 3 fraction bars here. Each fraction bar is broken into 4 equal parts, and 1 out of the 4 equal parts is shaded. So each fraction bar represents 1/4. So I'm going to label them with 1/4 because 1 out of the 4 parts are shaded. Now, to figure out how many total fourths are shaded, I can write an addition equation. So my addition equation would be 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. And if I add those together, that would give me 3/4. I could also write this as a multiplication equation. Since I'm adding 1/4 3 times, my multiplication equation would be 3 times 1/4, which is 3/4. Now, 3/4 is a multiple of 3 and 1/4 because it is the product of those two numbers. So 3/4 is the third multiple of the unit fraction, one-fourth. Now I'm going to show you how to write fractions as multiples of unit fractions. Now remember, a unit fraction is a fraction with a numerator of 1. So I'm going to take my fraction 5/9 and I'm going to write it as a multiple of a unit fraction. And remember, a multiple is a product of two numbers. So 5/9 is going to be the product or the answer when I multiply two numbers together. Well, to do this, it's actually very easy. What I do is I take the numerator and that becomes the whole number that I'm multiplying. And then I take the denominator and I write it as a unit fraction. So 9 stays my denominator, and I put a 1 as my numerator so that it is a unit fraction. So 5/9 is the fifth multiple of the unit fraction 1/9, because 5 times 1/9 is equal to 5/9. So let me do another example. I'm going to take 3/8 and write it as a multiple of a unit fraction. So I'm going to find two numbers that I can multiply together to get 3/8, and one of them has to be a unit fraction. So what I do is I take my numerator, and that becomes my whole number. And I'm going to take my denominator, and I'm going to keep it the same. And I need to make this a unit fraction, so my numerator is going to be 1. So my multiplication equation would be 3 times 1/8 equals 3/8. And 3/8 is the third multiple of the unit fraction 1/8, because when you multiply 3 times 1/8, you get 3/8. And just one more example, just so I know that you've got it down. I'm going to write 2/10 as a fraction, or I'm sorry, as a multiple of unit fractions. So I'm going to take my numerator, which is 2, and that's going to be my whole number. And I'm going to multiply it by a unit fraction. Well, it has to have the denominator of 10, and for it to be a unit fraction, my numerator must be 1. So 2/10 is a multiple of both 2 and 1/10, because it is the product when I multiply those two numbers together. And 2/10 is the second multiple of 1/10.